talk a little bit about the role of AI and creativity. And I'm going to put this microphone away, so this is the whole talk. And specifically, we're going to talk about the question of what does it mean to take a machine learning algorithm like a neural network and ask it to make some music or to make some art. And so, first let's talk about machine learning 101. How many of you here have know what a neural network is? Show of hands? Okay. Fun fact, I can't see your hands, but that's okay. I'm presuming some of you raised your hands. So a neural network is a multi-layer computational model. The animation you're seeing here, you'll see some black dots. Those we call neurons by analogy to the brain. And they're connected together by those white lines, which would be the axons connecting the neurons together in the brain. But it's really only an analogy. The basic idea is that each of these neurons performs a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of work. Maybe it sums up some numbers and does a multiplication. And in doing that across numerous neurons in a state-of-the-art model for translation, you might be talking about millions of neurons, and now we're talking about models that contain billions of neurons and being able to train them on GPUs. And the way the training works is that those white lines are actually weights. They're numbers, maybe between like -1 and 1. And there are rules, training rules, that allow those numbers to be slowly adapted to solve a problem. So for example, the network might see a picture of something in a laundry basket, and it's trying to figure out what's in that laundry basket. And in fact, it is a dog. I have to wait, yeah, it's a dog, I can't tell from here. And if it guesses wrong, it gets a little bit of error signal, and gradually, over millions and millions of trials, it gradually learns to identify things. And the cool part about it is it does so in a way that is flexible in general. So it will learn little filters like detecting edges or detecting little patches of light, and it will figure out what a dog is or a cat is, not by being told with a bunch of rules what that dog or cat is, but by figuring it out for itself. So the take-home message on this is, if artificial intelligence is the job of building smart computers or clever computers, then machine learning is building computers that can learn to be clever. And we've seen some huge, huge gains in very real-world hard problems using machine learning. One of the most recent is the problem of translation, and some work that actually happened at Google, the group that I work for, and other groups, is learning how to translate from one language to another by simply showing a neural network match sentences. So the neural network would see as input a sentence in English, and then it would know what language it was trying to translate into, and it would try to translate that sentence, and if it got it wrong, it would get some error. And it learns to train all of the neurons in the network with the weights to make the right prediction. And the quality of this is nothing less, in my mind, than shocking and revolutionary. So if we look at, this came from an article written by a Japanese researcher who was looking at translation and the expressiveness and the quality of translation. And we see in our old model a translation of a line that came back, went into Japanese and came back to English from Hemingway. Whether the leopard had what the demand at that altitude, there's no that nobody explained. Okay? Captures the gist of what's happening, but it definitely is not fluent. The new system that uses a neural network translates as, no one can explain what leopard was seeking at that altitude. It missed the it's marked in blue there for you. But it suggests to me that these models are getting good enough, and they're getting good enough because they're big and we have lots of data, that we can start to ask questions about, can we do some things with these models that are genuinely expressive, that allow us to create something new? Can we generate new paragraphs? Can we generate music? Can we generate art? And what does that mean for us in terms of creativity? So we start here. We start with something as simple as Google Inbox's Smart Reply that gives you a sentence like, I've got no plans yet, or I just sent them to you. And we're hoping to move from there towards more expressive uses of this technology, not only in music and drawing, but also in language and elsewhere. By the way, that statistic should be surprising to you, I think. It's surprising to me that 12% of responses sent on mobile are sent with ML-based suggestions. That's a huge number. Let's hit a reset. I'm a gun parent, or my daughter Olivia here was at gun. She graduated, she's at Cal Poly now. My son Sam is at JLS now. I think I heard someone whispering his name, so at least one person knows who one of these kids is. And I put their picture up here, not because I wanted to show off these kids, but because I wanted to make a comment now, moving from translation towards using technology to communicate. I'm here to talk about art and music, but I think what makes art important is that it is an artist communicating with her audience. It's about having something to say. And we've always used technology to support this. In the arts, we have paint, we have film cameras, we have drum machines, we have guitars, etc. And so the reason I put this slide up here is to connect back to sort of fundamentally what is happening with this revolution of having mobile devices and smarter software. It is that people are finding new ways to communicate. Maybe it's with Snapchat and Instagram. And this is really directed for the parents in the room. I can't see you, but I know you're there. I think there is a huge risk with these smartphones sort of taking over our kids' lives. Here's Sam and Olivia, we were in Japan, and you see the device is ubiquitous. It's everywhere, it's sitting next to the ramen. But at the same time, I think it opens up new and very interesting opportunities for this next generation to communicate in a way that opens up more very interesting ways to explore each other's lives. And I think there's an aspect of this that's very positive if we're careful with what we do. And so I want you to see this connection between art and music and communication and try to make this overarching connection back to that machine translation and ask the question, can machine learning give us something new, something we don't have right now, give rise to some new form of expressivity? And I hope as I drag you through 2 examples, you'll see that music and art are pretty cool places to explore this. So, we're going to go to number 1. And number 1 is about drawing. We're going to talk about how to train machine learning algorithms, neural networks, to draw pictures. And we're going to use a data set that came from a game called Quick Draw. How many people here have heard of Quick Draw? Definitely see a few hands up. It was a game of playing Pictionary against the computer, and the computer captures your drawing, and if you get it right, it says, oh, you drew a bear. We've now collected over 1 billion drawings with this game. It's a shocking number. And we saved all of the strokes. So you see that beautiful bear on the right. We can actually animate out the drawing of that bear. It's not just the pixels that we have. We get to see what people draw first and what people draw later. And so what we're going to do, what we did, was we decided to learn to draw based upon these silly small drawings. And I want you to come away, I'm going to make 1 point about machine learning that I think is important for this. Okay? They're about, if we had time, we could go into 3 or 4 principles of machine learning that are important for arts. But that principle is that memorization is a bad idea. Memorization is a bad idea. And the reason memorization is a bad idea is that a model that can just memorize the data that it sees never learns what's important about the data. Okay? We want to understand the gist of drawing a cat, the gist of drawing a bear. It may seem like a silly thing to do, but something we're trying, and I think we have some nice output from it. And so take a close look at what we have here on the screen. We have 3 funny words: encoder, Z, and decoder. The job of the encoder is to take the drawing and represent it in some way that it can be understood by the machine learning algorithm. It's encoding the drawing in some new space. On the other side, the decoder's job is to take advantage of whatever information is in that space and recreate the drawing. Okay? Now, if you make Z, which you can think of as kind of the memory, how much juice does this model have? If you make Z huge, then what's it going to do? The simplest thing is just to memorize all the strokes because it has more capacity than it needs. So what we do is we always make Z small. We even sometimes add a little bit of numeric noise to Z. Now that brings up kind of a nice and fascinating effect, which is that the model is not able to reproduce everything that it sees. And while I've been talking, we've been looking at these 2 drawings. The input was drawn by David Ha, the primary researcher on this project. The one that's decoded, the output one, doesn't look exactly the same. Right? It's got 6 whiskers, not 5. And that's because this model doesn't know how to represent a 5-whiskered cat. It doesn't see enough of them. And so it sees a 5-whiskered cat, and the best that it can do is make a 6-whiskered cat. And I think there's something very, very suggestive about that in terms of what we might want to do with art and music. These are some yoga poses that were drawn from a model trained on yoga. You can see that a machine learning model can capture lots and lots of variance while still not being able to memorize the data. So none of those poses exist in the real data set. They're ones that are dreamt up by the machine. And we have ways to make the drawings a little bit riskier, a little bit crazier. So the ones on the bottom are crazier, hot yoga, bad for your health. Don't do them, they'll hurt you. But the ones on the top, you can safely try them out. Furthermore, because we have the strokes in place, that as we see the drawings as they're being made, we can start a drawing and let the machine finish it for us. And I think this ability to sort of take a part of an idea from us and expand upon it is really interesting too. So here is David trying to learn how to draw a mosquito, and this whole cycle. And he actually said he had no idea how to draw a mosquito before doing this project, and that you draw the head and look to your right. You see 9 different ways you might complete that mosquito. And so there's a kind of playfulness and an ability to explore that I think is really wonderful. Finally, because these models cannot memorize data, they can sometimes uncover interesting, maybe funny aspects about our everyday world. On the left, we have a bunch of cats that are pretty normal cat drawings, and they get more or less reproduced by the model as cats. On the right, an 8-legged pig, it gets turned into a 4-legged pig because this model just can't do 8-legged pigs. And my favorite drawing in the world from this project is that truck, which is put into a model that knows about pigs. And, right, you're laughing, right? It's a pig truck. And I don't think I could draw a pig truck that's that quite capturing the essence of pig and retaining the essence of truck. And so what you can see is, this bit that you laugh is like, there's nothing wrong with using machine learning to build out tools for artists that are fun, that allow you to explore the space and allow you to play around. What's wrong with that? We work to live and not vice versa. Incidentally, there are no 3-eyed cats, and toothbrushes do not make interesting cats. So yeah, that too. All right, so I'm going to shift gears, given the amount of time we have, and I'm going to talk a little bit about music, which is something that I've spent more time with than drawing pigs and drawing trucks. And specifically, I'm going to talk about teaching a neural network how to play music. In this case, we're going to talk about playing piano music, and we're going to talk about classical music. I've been working in this space for 25 years, and I can tell you there have been many, many attempts to take a bunch of musical compositions by famous composers and then teach a neural network how to make a new one. Here's 100 Bach compositions. Let's make the 101st. And by and large, the results have been, at best, interesting and good. That doesn't sound right. At best, interesting, but not great. How about that? In this case, we changed the rules of the game a little bit. And instead of trying to predict the next note in a musical composition, you see the musical score there. Instead, we're going to work with performances, real performances, made by great pianists who are sitting in front of a great piano and trying as hard as they can to win a piano contest. And this data came not from Google, this came from Yamaha, who run a piano competition every year called E-Competition. And they released the audio and they released the MIDI, so what happened on the piano keyboard. And so what you see now is what we're going to train on is not just the musical score, which is pristine, right? The notes are exactly where they need to be. There's no noise at all. And instead, we're going to get much messier data. We're going to get a real performance with decisions like I'm going to play louder, I'm going to play softer, I'm going to play faster, I'm going to play slower. And compared to what we can do with the scores, I can tell you that the outputs that we're getting from these performances are very interesting. So I want to play a couple of them for you. What you're hearing now is the output of a neural network. These compositions or these performances, you can call them what you want because the model's kind of playing it at the same time as it's composing it. They are not similar to any of the samples in the training set, so it's not just memorizing. You also shouldn't expect to hear long-term form. This model's not capable, this neural network's not capable of writing a 5-minute sonata. But I hope what you'll hear is by picking up on the timing and the loudness changes of real performance, we give this neural network something that's quite interesting to learn from and quite interesting for us to see. Think of it as the musical analogy of the pig truck. So okay, let's listen to a neural network play some music. So let's listen to another one. Before we make any decisions about how bad it is.
back with you and play more later. There's no need to be alarmed. These models aren't quite that good. Take a look at the, this is Chopin's Etude in E major on top. Printed out as what's called the piano roll, so what you think of as times going from left to right, and you're seeing the piano keyboard. And these are a couple of the neural network performances that we have at the bottom. Those long lines you see on the right are because the network forgot to lift up the piano key. So we're saved by the fact that we're synthesizing this right, so the piano is kind of fast. Okay. And furthermore, this is all available to play with online. Everything that we do in Magenta is open source. And you can play with the JavaScript behind this. And there's a bunch of other stuff on our blog and my website. I'll come back to that. But in the remaining time, I want to get in one more demo, which is when we talk about, let's go back to drawing for a second. When we talk about one of the cool things that we can do with that hourglass shaped model that has that small Z in the middle, is we can move around that space. We could explore what's near that one pig truck and what other trucks we could generate near that pig truck, or what's near this one cat. Because the space that we have to play with is a vector of numbers, that Z. And so we can kind of move around numerically. And we've been working with that in the space of music as well. And what we've modeled now is not whole piano performances in the classical world, but pop music, and specifically loop-based pop music. And the model that we built, it's important to understand this, really only sees one measure of music at a time. And that allows us to build a model where we can move around that space. So what you're going to hear is a demo where we start with one measure supplied by Adam Roberts, who's the principal person on this project, and then you'll hear the last measure. And then you're going to hear the computer, the neural network, try to find its way from one to another. Okay? So let's give this a listen. That's one. That's the end. This is shorter, in case you're worried. We now did the same thing, but we have drums, bass, and a melody. And now we're chaining these measures together. So we're doing a whole pop composition. And this little thing you're going to hear, the neural network generated all three parts. And I think it's pretty interesting how, because they're coming from the same Z, that little compressed world, that they kind of communicate with each other. So the bass and the lead will sort of be coherent. Let's give it a listen to this short. Or not. All right. It's no big deal. I can play this at the break if somebody wants to hear it. It sounds great. I love it. So this is closing off. How many people here, you don't need to shout it out, but know what these are? These are guitar pedals. If you're an electric guitarist, you plug your guitar into this and you can add different effects. And we think of them as a goal for us. Because a project like Magenta, we write a lot of software, we write a lot of code, and we put it all in open source. But it's much harder to actually get to the point where we have tools that artists can use, and that musicians can use, not just coders. And so we're thinking all the time about what's the analogy of something that is so perfect, so useful as a guitar pedal. And if you're not seeing the analogy, I'll point out that these guitar pedals can all be simulated using your laptop. You know, you can pretty much replace them with code. But no guitarist is standing on stage and going over here and then, you know, messing with their laptop. It's not how it works. So we need to play by the rules of the artistic community. And so we're working towards, Why is this doing this? We're working towards that in our project. If you want to learn more, check us out. We're Magenta. It is a completely open source project. We have a blog and a discussion list, specifically because we're here. I'm here. We're always looking for more people for collaboration points. We're working really hard right now on some JavaScript and some one-off experiments that we can do with musicians and with artists, and we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us via our discussion list, that discuss button right there. And with that, I'm going to leave you, and I thank you all very much for your attention.